The lunch rush at La Lumiere, the city's most exclusive, chandelier-lit, marble-floored restaurant, had just begun. Soft, classical music floated in the air. Wealthy patrons spoke in low, refined voices. Cutlery clinked against porcelain plates worth more than some people's rent. And right in the middle of this polished world, a young black woman stood trembling. Her name was Aaliyah Carter, a 22-year-old waitress with tired eyes, a shaky breath, and a heart so full of kindness it nearly cracked under the weight of the moment. She held a tray in her hands, barely because the man screaming at her was so close his spit flecked her cheeks. "Are you stupid or just blind?" bellowed Gordon Slate, the restaurant manager, a broad-shouldered man with a red face and the personality of a storm about to break. The room froze. Every fork stopped mid-air. But no one dared speak. Aaliyah swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't mean—" "Don't talk back," he shouted louder than necessary, his voice echoing off the marble walls. The wealthy patrons watched like he was performing a play. Some leaned back in discomfort, others pretended to look away while their eyes remained glued to her humiliation. But no one stood up for her, not one. Gordon snatched the tray from her hands with a violent jerk. "You spilled soup on Mrs. Langford's shawl. Do you know how much her clothes cost? More than your entire yearly paycheck." The old woman in diamonds shook her head, disapproving but silent. Aaliyah's fingers trembled. "It was an accident, sir. Someone bumped into me." "Oh, now you're blaming the customers," he barked, laughing mockingly. "These people are worth more than your whole family tree." A few patrons exchanged uncomfortable glances, but still silence. Gordon stepped closer, towering over her. "You people come in here thinking you can act like you belong, but you don't. You never did." The words sliced through her chest. Aaliyah's lips quivered, her eyes stinging with tears she fought to hold back. "I'm just trying to do my job," she whispered. "Your job," he scoffed loudly, turning to the customers as if inviting them to laugh with him. "Your job is to listen, to serve, to keep your head down like everyone from your background should." Aaliyah's chin dropped, humiliation burning her cheeks. "Look at you," he sneered. "Walking around touching plates meant for real customers like you don't have dirt under your nails." A gasp traveled through the restaurant, but still, not a single person intervened. Gordon lifted the tray above his head as if considering throwing it. "Maybe I should fire you right here, right now, in front of everyone." Her heart raced. "Please, sir," she whispered. "Please, I need this job." He laughed cruelly. "Oh, I know you do. That's the only reason I keep trash like you around, to do the work no one else wants to do." Her hands clenched and unclenched. Her breath grew shaky. Her soul shrank under the weight of his words. "Look at me," he snapped. She forced her eyes upward. "No," he said coldly, "lower, that's better, shows where you really belong." A hush fell over the room. Aaliyah looked like she might collapse, and then something shifted in the air. A chair scraped quietly from one of the back tables, a small, almost unnoticeable sound, but powerful enough to draw Gordon's attention. A man stood up slowly from a secluded table where he'd been sitting with an elderly woman in a wheelchair. He wore a tailored navy suit, a gold watch that hugged his wrist like it belonged there, and an expression colder than winter marble. His presence alone had weight, calm, controlled power, the kind that didn't need to be announced, but Gordon didn't recognize him. "Hey you," Gordon snapped instantly, misdirecting his rage. "Is there a problem?" The man didn't answer immediately. He stepped forward, gently adjusting the blanket wrapped around the legs of the fragile woman beside him. Her hands trembled slightly and her voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "It's all right, Daniel," she murmured. "Let's not cause trouble." But Daniel, tall, composed, blue-eyed, kept walking forward with a kind of dignity that made every witness straighten subconsciously. Aaliyah saw him approaching and took a step back, unsure if he was there to help or to join the humiliation. Gordon, emboldened by the silent crowd, raised his voice again. "You want something? Or are you just another soft idiot who thinks this girl deserves to be here?" The room tensed. Even the chef peeking through the kitchen window froze. Daniel reached them and looked at Aaliyah first, not with pity, but with a gentle, warm understanding she hadn't seen all morning. "Are you all right?" He asked softly, voice steady. She blinked in surprise. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Gordon barked a laugh. "Oh, great, now we've got a hero, so you have no idea what type of worker she is. Lazy, careless, and—" Daniel raised one hand, calmly, silently, but with enough authority to silence the entire restaurant. Gordon stopped mid-sentence. Daniel then turned to the elderly woman behind him. "Mom, please stay where you are. I'll handle this." "Mom," the crowd whispered. But Gordon rolled his eyes. "You handling this? Who do you think you are? This is MY Restaurant, MY Rules." Daniel's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the elderly woman's frail voice drifted across the room. "Daniel, don't make a scene. I don't want you getting angry again." Again, people exchanged confused glances. Gordon smirked, mistaking the situation. "You heard her. Take Granny and sit down." Daniel turned back to Aaliyah. "Did he hurt you? Did he touch you? Tell me the truth." Gordon hissed, "You do not talk to staff over me. She's a nobody who made a mess." This time Daniel turned sharply, and the steel in his eyes was unmistakable. Aaliyah felt her heart hammer. Something about him, his confidence, his control, made him look like a man used to commanding entire boardrooms. Gordon still didn't sense the danger. He shoved a finger into Daniel's chest. "You better sit your entitled behind down before I throw you out of here too. I don't care who you think you are." The room fell silent. Aaliyah gasped. The elderly woman in the wheelchair closed her eyes like she knew something Gordon didn't, but Daniel simply breathed in once, slowly, as if giving the manager one last chance at decency. Then he said in a voice that shook the entire restaurant, "You've made a mistake." Gordon scoffed. "Oh yeah, and what mistake is that?" Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice enough to make everyone lean in. "Humiliating this young woman," answered Aaliyah with unmistakable respect. "Was your first mistake." He straightened his suit jacket. "But your second mistake," he leaned in just inches from Gordon's stunned face, "was assuming you have any power here." A pulse of confusion swept across the room. Gordon blinked. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Daniel exhaled calmly. Just one sentence left his lips. "Because you have no idea who I am." The room held its breath. "And today," Daniel added, "you're about to find out." Aaliyah's eyes widened. Gordon's smirk faltered. The entire restaurant leaned in like they were watching a thriller unfold. And then, because little did the cruel manager know, his life was about to be turned upside down. A stranger standing in the crowd knew a secret about this young woman, a secret that would shock everyone in the restaurant and change her life forever. Now, let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. Before the shouting, before the humiliation, before the entire restaurant watched her break, the morning had started quietly. Not peacefully, but quietly. The sun barely peeked over the rooftops in the small, worn-down neighborhood of East Haven, where the cracked pavement told stories of forgotten promises, and the houses held more love than money. Inside a tiny, two-room apartment that smelled faintly of lavender and old hardwood floors, Aaliyah Carter stood in front of a foggy mirror brushing her curls into a neat bun. Her reflection looked back at her with heavy eyelids and a tired smile. "Another day," she whispered to herself. "You can do this." Behind her, on a small fold-out cot pushed against the wall, her younger brother, Malik, lay bundled in a thin blanket. His face was peaceful in sleep, but the wheeze in his breathing reminded her of last night's coughing fit, the one that had left her pacing the room in panic. She tiptoed to his side. "Morning, troublemaker," she whispered, brushing a curl from his forehead. He didn't stir, but knowing he was still breathing eased the knot in her chest. Then she turned her attention to the woman lying on the main bed, her mother. Rose Carter, once a dance teacher with the grace of flowing water, now lay frail and unmoving beneath the sheets. Time and illness had taken what life had once given her: mobility, energy, speech. A stroke had left half her body paralyzed. Only her eyes still had the warmth that used to light up entire rooms. Aaliyah checked her temperature, gently touched her mother's hand, then whispered, "I'll be back before noon, Mama, I promise." A faint blink was her mother's response, their secret way of saying be safe. But today was different, because the small brown envelope on the kitchen counter, the one with the red stamp from the hospital, had nearly split Aaliyah's soul in half. The bill was double what she expected. Her mother needed a new set of medications, urgent ones, and Malik needed inhalers for his asthma attacks. The doctor had warned her, skipping even one dose isn't safe. But she had no more money. Not after rent, not after food, not after the emergency taxi ride last week when her mother had briefly stopped breathing. Aaliyah folded the hospital bill and tucked it into her apron. Her throat tightened. She had cried on the bathroom floor last night, quietly so no one would hear because her family already had enough sadness. Now she swallowed the fear, straightened her uniform, and forced on the bright smile she was famous for at work. "It's okay," she whispered, tying her apron. "Just get through today. One shift, one paycheck, that's all you need." But deep down, she knew one paycheck wasn't enough, not even close. Despite everything, Aaliyah was warm, soft-hearted, selfless, a giver. She was the type of young woman who volunteered at the community center on weekends, who brought home leftover bread from work for the little kids next door, who wrote dreams in a notebook she never had time to chase. Her dream? To become a nurse. a real one. With a badge, a uniform, and enough knowledge to help families like hers. But dreams cost money. Her life demanded survival. Still, she never complained. Not when she worked double shifts, not when customers at the restaurant ignored her, not when people judged her by her skin before her smile, not when she walked 40 minutes to work because her bus card expired. Aaliyah was the kind of young woman you rooted for because she never asked for anything, even when she deserved everything. As she made her mother's breakfast, soft oats with honey, her eyes kept drifting to the brown envelope. That bill, that horrible, heavy bill. Last night she calculated her remaining money 3 times. She counted the coins twice. She checked every pocket of every old coat, hoping a miracle dollar bill had been forgotten somewhere. She was short, so painfully short. Today wasn't just another shift. Today was survival. Today she needed overtime, tips, a miracle, something, anything to pay for the medication before tomorrow morning. If her mother missed even 1 dose, Aaliyah shut her eyes hard, forcing away the fear. Not again. Not another emergency. Not another night of crying and praying she wouldn't lose her mother the way she lost her father years ago. She poured Malik a small bowl of cereal for when he woke up, kissed her mother on the forehead, grabbed her cheap coat, and stepped out of their apartment before her emotions broke. As she locked the door, she whispered, "God, please let today be kind." The morning was cold. Her breath came out in white puffs as she hurried past shuttered grocery stores, cracked sidewalks, and stray cats searching garbage cans. Aaliyah held her coat tight against the wind and kept her eyes focused straight ahead. The world felt heavier today. She passed a jewelry store where a bride-to-be was choosing rings with her fiancé. Warm lights glowed around them. They looked so carefree. She kept walking. She passed a bakery where fresh bread filled the air. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten yet. She never ate before work. Her shifts were long, and she couldn't afford to run out of energy too soon. She kept walking. She passed a bus full of office workers dressed in clean suits. She stood straighter, suddenly aware of the small tear in her coat sleeve. She kept walking. But something in her chest tightened with every step, fear maybe, or hope being squeezed too hard. She reached the edge of downtown where polished sidewalks met towering glass buildings. Expensive cars rolled by like silent declarations of wealth she would never touch. People in luxury outfits walked past her without a glance. Aaliyah lowered her head. She always felt small here, invisible. But she wasn't here to feel worthy. She was here because she had no other choice. She finally reached La Lumiere, the upscale restaurant where only the wealthy dined. The red carpet entrance gleamed under gold lights. The marble pillars looked like they belonged in a palace. She wiped her shoes before entering, not because anyone asked, but because she didn't want to dirty anything she couldn't afford to replace. Inside, everything sparkled. Crystal glasses, white tablecloths. Oil paintings that probably cost more than her entire building. Aaliyah took in a deep breath. Here, she wasn't just Aaliyah. She was invisible background noise, a pair of hands meant to serve, smile, and stay silent. She tied her apron and prepared for her shift, only to hear a voice that instantly tightened her spine. "You're late." Aaliyah flinched. She turned to see Gordon Slate, the restaurant manager, glaring at her with arms crossed and a sneer on his lips. I'm 2 minutes early," she said softly. He scoffed. "Don't talk back. People like you are lucky to even work here. Now get moving. Tables won't clean themselves." She nodded quickly. She didn't have the luxury to argue, not when her mother's life depended on this job, not when she needed every dollar, every tip, every opportunity to survive. Aaliyah kept her head down and got to work, polishing silverware, preparing trays, checking reservations, folding napkins. Her mind raced with calculations. She needed at least $180 today. Her paycheck wouldn't come for another 4 days. The medication couldn't wait. Her stomach twisted with anxiety, but she breathed in slowly and whispered, "One good day, just give me one good day." She didn't know the world had other plans. She didn't know today would break her, so it could rebuild her in ways she never imagined. She didn't know a stranger was about to walk into her life, a billionaire, quietly watching. A man whose mother she would unknowingly help. A man whose single decision would change her world forever. And she had no idea that before the lunch rush was over, the same cruel manager who belittled her every chance he got would humiliate her in front of the entire restaurant. Nor did she know that someone important would witness everything. But for now, Aaliyah tied her apron, steadied her breath, and stepped into the dining hall, praying today wouldn't destroy her. She was wrong. It would. But it would also save her. Aaliyah adjusted her apron one last time before stepping fully onto the polished marble floor of La Lumiere. The soft classical music hummed through the air, and servers hustled back and forth, balancing trays of caviar, crystal glasses, and steaming entrees. Every corner of the restaurant screamed wealth: golden chandeliers, gleaming silverware, and tables with pristine white linen. The air smelled faintly of truffle oil, fresh flowers, and the subtle perfume of patrons who could afford the world. She gripped her tray tightly, trying to steady the shaking in her hands. Each step toward her first table felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of snakes. She was fully aware that one mistake could ruin everything, not just her paycheck, but her mother's medicine, her brother's inhalers, her family's survival. The stakes were unbearable, and she felt them pressing against her chest like a physical weight. The first table she approached was an elderly couple in matching silk outfits. They smiled politely when she arrived, but Aaliyah's nerves made her apologize for even the smallest perceived flaw. "Good afternoon, sir, ma'am," she said softly. "May I take your order?" The man cleared his throat. "Yes, bring us the special and make sure it's perfect." His eyes scanned her from head to toe, not maliciously, but with that quiet judgment some people unconsciously reserve for those who look less wealthy. Aaliyah nodded and quickly moved along. Despite the anxiety, a small flame of hope burned in her chest. Maybe today would be different. Maybe this shift would go smoothly. She could earn a little extra in tips and finally buy her mother the medication before it was too late. Maybe today she wouldn't be humiliated. Maybe. She almost smiled at the thought, but the next table made her frown again. A group of young, impeccably dressed businessmen laughed loudly, their cufflinks glinting in the afternoon light. One of them spilled a glass of water intentionally on the table just as she passed. "Watch it," Aaliyah said instinctively, stepping back, but the man shrugged, smirked, and didn't even glance at her. She let out a shaky breath. "Focus. Just focus," she whispered, but she didn't know the storm waiting for her. It started with a small mistake. A tray of soups was just slightly tilted, and one bowl sloshed over the edge. The scalding liquid barely missed hitting the chair leg, but managed to splash on Mrs. Langford's expensive silk shawl. Aaliyah froze, her heart sank. She had barely touched the tray, but it was enough for Gordon Slate to notice. He came storming out from behind the service counter like a tornado made of rage. "What did I tell you about paying attention?" Screamed, voice echoing against the marble walls. He grabbed the tray from her hands and held it up like a weapon. Aaliyah flinched. I'm sorry, it was an accident," she said, her voice quivering. "Accident?" he roared. "Don't you dare call that an accident. That shawl costs more than your entire apartment. Do you even understand the concept of money?" His face was red with fury, his eyes blazing. "I've had it with your kind thinking you can just stroll into a place like this and act like you belong." The patrons froze. Crystal glasses paused mid-air. Forks hovered above plates, but no one moved, no one intervened. Aaliyah felt the walls closing in, the weight of dozens of eyes boring into her skin. She was utterly alone. "Maybe I should fire you right here, right now?" Gordon continued, slamming his hand on the marble counter so hard that it made a hollow, ringing sound that echoed through the room. "Maybe then people like you would learn your place." Aaliyah's vision blurred with tears, but she blinked rapidly, refusing to let them fall. "Please, please don't, sir. I need this job. I have a family." He cut her off, laughing cruelly. "Family? Ha, what family? What could your family possibly mean in a place like this?" He pointed at the patrons, all dressed in silk and diamonds, all sipping champagne. "You are nothing. You are a disgrace." Aaliyah's hands shook. She could barely lift her tray anymore, her whole body trembling under the weight of his words. Then he made it worse. He dragged her forward right in front of the central dining area where everyone could see. "Look at her," he shouted to the room. "Look at her, serving food to people who could literally buy and sell her 1,000 times over. Does this girl look like she belongs here? No, she's a mistake, a mistake." A hush fell over the room. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable, pretending they weren't witnessing a human being destroyed. Others leaned forward, intrigued by the spectacle, feeding off the drama like it were theater. Aaliyah felt herself shrinking, her knees weak, her heart pounding like a drum. She clenched her teeth. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm trying my best, please," Gordon laughed again, crueler than before. "Trying your best is pathetic, pathetic, and don't think for a second that anyone here will defend you. They wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. You're a joke. A servant, that's all you are. Understand?" Aaliyah's body shook with humiliation. Her cheeks burned hot, her eyes threatened to spill tears she couldn't afford to cry. For a fleeting moment she considered running out of the restaurant, leaving her paycheck, leaving the hope of helping her mother behind. But she couldn't, she wouldn't. Survival meant facing this storm head-on, no matter how cruel. Gordon wasn't done. He shoved a hand into her shoulder, making her stumble. This is why people like you should stay in your lane. We give you work and this is the gratitude we get. A mess on our hands. You think anyone here respects you? Think again. Some of the staff looked away, embarrassed. Some whispered to each other. None of them dared intervene. Aaliyah felt utterly, completely alone. She wanted to vanish. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She wanted to disappear and never face another day of judgment, racism, or cruelty. And then from the back of the restaurant, a soft sound, the scraping of a chair. Almost unnoticeable, yet somehow it felt like a lifeline. A man stood up slowly, calmly, collected, a presence that seemed too powerful to ignore. He adjusted the blanket on the wheelchair beside him, a frail, elderly woman whose eyes were filled with concern but trust. The world seemed to pause as he started walking toward them. His suit was flawless, his posture dignified, his eyes kind but carrying an unmistakable authority. Aaliyah felt a flicker of hope. Could anyone actually help her? Gordon, unaware of the storm approaching, bellowed again. Hey, do you think you can just stand there? Mind your business. The man didn't respond immediately. He continued walking, measuring each step, his calm confidence clashing violently with Gordon's anger. Patrons began to murmur, sensing that something was about to happen. Even the waiters paused, trays in hand, jaws tight. Aaliyah took a trembling breath. Her chest still hurt from the manager's words, but her hope sparked just a little. Maybe this stranger would intervene. Maybe this time she wouldn't be alone. And then he stopped just a few feet away from Gordon, looked at Aaliyah with a gentle, steady gaze, and said, "Is she all right?" The question was simple. But in the silence of the room, it carried power. Aaliyah's throat went dry. Gordon's face contorted with disbelief. This stranger was challenging him, and the entire restaurant felt the shift. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Even the chandeliers swayed slightly, as if aware that the tension in the room had reached its breaking point. Gordon Slate, red-faced and trembling with rage, glared at the man who dared challenge him. "Who do you think you are?" Gordon bellowed, waving his arms in frustration. "This is MY Restaurant. My rules. You don't walk in here and—" "Enough," the man interrupted, his voice calm, deep, and commanding. The single word cut through the noise like a blade, halting every whisper, every murmured comment from the patrons. "Step aside." Gordon blinked, incredulous. "Step aside, who do you—" The man's gaze shifted toward Aaliyah. His eyes softened instantly as they met hers. There was no judgment, no condescension, only understanding, only recognition. Aaliyah felt her heart beat faster. Something in the way he looked at her, so steady, so kind, made her feel like she could breathe for the first time in hours. "Sir, please," the man said gently, stepping closer to her. "Are you hurt?" I'm fine," Aaliyah stammered, her voice barely audible. She wanted to believe him, she wanted to feel safe. But the humiliation from Gordon's words was still a fresh burn on her skin. Gordon laughed, but it was a sharp, nervous laugh. "Hurt, hurt. This is my restaurant, and do you not see what you're doing?" The man interrupted again, his voice rising slightly but still measured. "Look at her, she is doing her job, she is trying, and you—" He shook his head slowly. "You are nothing but cruelty." The patrons leaned in closer. The restaurant, once filled with laughter and polite murmurs, had grown silent. Everyone's eyes darted between the manager and this man who seemed to command the very air. Aaliyah's breath caught. There was authority in him, but not the kind that threatened. This was the authority of someone who did not tolerate injustice. Gordon's face flushed darker. "How dare you? Who do you think you are, speaking to me like this?" The man's calm demeanor didn't falter. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, his presence filling the space. "I am the one who ensures that injustice is not tolerated, and you, sir, have crossed a line, not with me but with her." Aaliyah's eyes widened in disbelief. Was he defending her in front of everyone? "You're just another," Gordon began, his voice rising to a yell, "entitled rich man thinking he can come in here and tell me." The man raised a hand, not threateningly, not violently, just raised it to stop Gordon's tirade. And then softly, almost in a whisper meant for no one but Gordon, he said, "I am the CEO of this entire company." The words fell like thunder in the silent restaurant. Every patron froze. Even the waitstaff, who had long endured Gordon's temper, stood rooted to the spot. Gordon's jaw dropped. What?" he stammered. That's impossible. You can't." The man's eyes met his with calm precision. "Check the employee records, check the contracts. I built this company from the ground up. I have invested every bit of my life into this establishment, and you humiliated someone I consider family." Aaliyah blinked, her mind racing. Family, him, but... The elderly woman in the wheelchair, who had been quietly observing everything, spoke up then, her voice trembling but clear. "Daniel, tell him." The man, Daniel, nodded at her. Yes, Mom, this young woman, Aaliyah, has been feeding you breakfast every morning when no one else would. When you couldn't feed yourself, she helped. And you, this manager, he gestured toward Gordon, whose face had gone pale. You have humiliated a person who has shown nothing but kindness and care. Gordon's hands shook. He tried to regain composure. I didn't know, You didn't know. Daniel's voice was low now, but every word hit like a hammer. Let me make this crystal clear. This young woman has done more for people like my mother in a single week than you have in your entire miserable career, and you dared to call her worthless in front of everyone. Aaliyah felt tears sting her eyes. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. Someone with real power, someone with influence, standing up for her, calling out the cruelty she had endured. Daniel looked around the room. Everyone here heard the words he used, and everyone here saw the way he treated her. This is not just incompetence, this is deliberate cruelty, and I will not allow it in any company I lead. Gordon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The color drained from his face entirely. I was just following the rules, he cried, his voice cracking. The rules, Daniel echoed, incredulous. The rules do not allow abuse, they do not allow humiliation, they do not allow racism, and they certainly do not allow harming someone who is trying their best to survive. Then Daniel turned to Aaliyah. You've done nothing wrong, absolutely nothing. What happened here today is not your fault, it is his. The room seemed to exhale collectively. Patrons who had avoided looking at Aaliyah before now met her gaze, some with shame, some with relief that justice was arriving. Gordon stuttered, trying to defend himself. I've managed this place for 10 years. I've never, Daniel's expression hardened. And yet here you are, exposing yourself as the person you truly are. Effective immediately, you are suspended. We will review your employment. But know this, you will not humiliate another human being again without consequences. Ever. Aaliyah felt a wave of relief, but also disbelief. She wanted to speak to thank Daniel, but her throat was too tight. Daniel knelt slightly to her level, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You are safe now, Aaliyah, I promise you that. From now on, you will never have to fear this man or anyone like him, again. She nodded, tears finally escaping. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Daniel replied softly. Just know this, your kindness, your courage, your heart. Those are the qualities that will take you far in life, and I will make sure the world finally recognizes them. Gordon's face went red with fury, and he tried one last desperate act. You can't fire me. Daniel stood, towering over him, eyes cold but measured. I don't need to fire you to end your control. I am the CEO. You have no authority here. You have humiliated someone under my watch. That is enough. Consider today a turning point for you and for her. Gordon sputtered, completely defeated, as Daniel walked back to Aaliyah's side. The elderly woman in the wheelchair smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. See, she said softly, I told you he would come. Aaliyah shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't understand why. Why would someone like you care about someone like me? Daniel smiled, warm but unwavering. Because I recognize humanity when I see it, and you, Aaliyah Carter, are pure of heart. You feed, care, and nurture even when no one asks. That is rare. That is invaluable. That is why I am here. Aaliyah's chest tightened with emotion. She had spent her life feeling invisible, undervalued, and unworthy. And now, standing here, a man of unimaginable wealth and influence was telling her that her life and her choices mattered. Daniel placed a hand over hers. Today, you will never have to struggle alone again. Consider this just the beginning. Aaliyah's lips trembled. I don't even know what to say. Then say nothing, Daniel replied. Just let this be the moment your life changes forever. The room remained silent, the once cruel and judgmental crowd now witnessing a moment of undeniable transformation. Gordon stood frozen, powerless, as Daniel's calm authority reigned supreme. And in that moment, Aaliyah realized this was not luck. This was destiny. The silence that followed Daniel's revelation was deafening. Gordon Slate's face had turned a shade of red no words could match, his anger drained, replaced with fear. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, still processing the shock. The man who had quietly observed from a back table was not just any customer. He was the CEO, the owner, the authority that Gordon had spent years thinking he could outrank. Daniel looked around the room, his gaze sharp but controlled. Gordon Slate, he said slowly, letting each word land like a hammer, your actions today were unacceptable. Humiliating someone for your own prejudice is not only immoral, it is intolerable. You will face immediate consequences. Gordon stuttered, trying to find a defense. I was just doing my job. She spilled the soup. Spilled soup, Daniel interrupted sharply, voice cold. You deliberately attacked her dignity. That is what is on trial here, and I am the jury." The room was silent, every patron and staff member glued to the confrontation. Even the kitchen staff had stopped mid-task, knives hovering in the air. Gordon's voice faltered as he realized that no ally in the room could help him. You can't," Gordon began, but Daniel's presence alone froze him. "You are suspended effective immediately," Daniel said, eyes unwavering. "Your future here will be determined after a full review, but mark my words, humiliating or discriminating against anyone under my watch will not be tolerated, ever again." The words landed with finality. Gordon's shoulders slumped. The arrogance and cruelty that had once defined him had been replaced by panic and disbelief. The patrons who had once watched quietly, unsure whether to intervene, now began murmuring among themselves. Some approached Aaliyah softly, offering apologies, recognizing their prior inaction. One wealthy woman, the very one whose shawl had been splashed with soup, approached her table. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't deserve that. I should have spoken up." Aaliyah, still shaking, managed a small smile. "It's okay, thank you." But it was Daniel who walked beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to forgive anyone," he said quietly, "because you will never have to endure that again. From now on, you are protected." Aaliyah's chest tightened with relief. She couldn't believe what was happening. This was more than anyone could ever hope for in a single day. After Gordon was escorted out of the restaurant by security, Daniel turned his attention fully to Aaliyah. He guided her to a quiet corner of the dining hall, away from the curious eyes of patrons. "You have shown more courage in a single hour than most people show in a lifetime," Daniel said, his voice calm but filled with admiration. "And that courage deserves recognition, not just from me but from the world." Aaliyah swallowed hard. I was just doing my job. I'm not." "Not what?" Daniel asked gently, his gaze softening. "Not someone worth helping, not someone who deserves to be treated with respect. Don't say that. Today proved the opposite. Today the world saw who you really are." Aaliyah's lips quivered. "But I still need money for my mother's medicine, for my brother." Daniel smiled, a warmth that seemed to fill the entire room. "We're going to take care of that, and not just for today. I want to ensure that you and your family never have to worry about basic needs again. Medical care, education, housing, everything will be handled." Her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," Daniel replied. "Let your life say it for you. Consider this the start of a new chapter." He reached into his suit pocket and handed her a card. It wasn't just a business card, it was a direct line to him. "Call me anytime you need help, or just advice, or guidance, anything. You are never alone." Aaliyah clutched the card like a lifeline, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. For years, she had lived in survival mode, one paycheck, one shift, one small miracle at a time. And now she realized she was standing at the threshold of a life she had never dared to imagine. Later that day, Daniel escorted Aaliyah and her family, her mother in her wheelchair and Malik in his little backpack, out of the city streets to a quiet, luxurious car waiting just outside. "Where are we going?" Aaliyah asked, still unsure whether this was real. "To start making sure your family is safe," Daniel replied. "We'll take care of your mother's medication, set up regular doctor visits, and I've arranged for you to continue your education. You have dreams, Aaliyah. It's time you pursue them." Aaliyah's voice caught. I've only ever wanted to help people, to care for my mom, to help my brother. I never imagined." "Imagine this," Daniel said softly. "Imagine a life where fear doesn't rule your decisions, where kindness is rewarded, not punished, where every step you take forward is supported, not hindered. That life is yours now." Her mother rose, smiled weakly but with tears in her eyes. "You are a blessing," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "No, she's the blessing. Aaliyah has a heart that can move mountains. I'm just making sure the world finally sees it." Malik, shy at first, looked up at Daniel. "You're really going to help my sister?" Daniel crouched down to meet his gaze. "Yes, little man, and I promise we're going to make sure your family has everything you need. You'll never go hungry, and you'll never have to be afraid of being humiliated again." Aaliyah couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She buried her face into her mother's shoulder, whispering, "I can't believe this. I can't believe this is real." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her back. "Believe it. You earned this. Not because you are lucky, but because of who you are. Your goodness, your strength, your courage, that's what brought you here, and it will take you even further." Over the next few weeks, Daniel made good on his promises. The medications arrived promptly, doctors came to the apartment, and Malik's asthma was monitored. Aaliyah began classes online with scholarships Daniel had arranged. She no longer had to work double shifts just to survive. She worked part-time at La Lumiere, now under respectful supervision, and she even began attending advanced nursing courses. The emotional weight of her family's suffering lifted little by little, replaced with hope, gratitude, and a growing confidence that she could achieve her dreams. Daniel didn't just give her money, he gave her dignity, security, and the ability to dream again. One evening, as Aaliyah sat with her mother and brother, she whispered, "I never imagined that someone could care so much, that someone could change everything." Daniel smiled. "It wasn't just me. You changed everything by being brave. I just made sure the world finally saw it." And in that moment, Aaliyah realized her life had not only been saved from hardship, it had been transformed into something beautiful, secure, and full of possibility. 5 years had passed since that fateful day at La Lumiere. 5 years since a moment of cruelty collided with a moment of destiny. The memory of Gordon Slate's cruel words still lingered faintly in Aaliyah's mind, but it no longer held power over her. That chapter had closed. Now Aaliyah Carter walked confidently down a sunlit street in downtown East Haven. She wore a crisp white coat, her nurse's coat, over a professional uniform, her ID badge gleaming in the morning sunlight. Her hair was pulled back neatly, but a few curls framed her face, softening her strong features. She moved with purpose, with certainty, with the quiet authority of someone who had overcome immense struggle. Gone were the days of uncertainty, of fearing for her family's health, of wondering if the next day would bring humiliation or starvation. Today, she had everything she needed, and more. Behind her, the apartment she once shared with her mother and Malik had been replaced with a spacious, warm home in a quiet, safe neighborhood. Rose Carter, once frail and dependent, now had access to the best medical care. Her speech had improved, her mobility had increased, and the light that had always shone in her eyes now glimmered brighter than ever. Malik, now 9, ran ahead with his bicycle, laughing freely without fear of asthma attacks, his backpack replaced with a school bag brimming with books. Aaliyah's heart swelled every time she saw him smile, every time she heard him play without worry or cough. Every morning over breakfast in their bright kitchen, Aaliyah reminded herself how far they had come. She poured her mother a cup of tea and Malik his cereal just as she had done all those years ago, but now with security, comfort, and peace. "No more worries, Mama," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Rose's face. "We're safe now, and we're going to keep getting stronger every day." Rose smiled, her eyes filled with love and pride. "All because of your heart, my girl," she said. "You never gave up even when the world tried to break you." Aaliyah's gaze shifted to Malik, who was finishing his breakfast with a grin. "And because of you, little man," she said. "You're strong too, you've always been." In that moment, she realized something fundamental. Their lives were no longer dictated by fear or poverty. They were dictated by love, courage, and opportunity. Aaliyah's journey into nursing had not been easy. Daniel had arranged for scholarships and mentors, but she still had to study hard, learn quickly, and push herself further than she had ever imagined. Yet she thrived. Her kindness, patience, and intelligence quickly became her trademarks. Patients adored her. Colleagues respected her. She had earned every accolade, every promotion, every recognition, not because of the hand she had been dealt, but because of her heart and perseverance. Her office at the city hospital overlooked the skyline. From there, she often thought back to that day at La Lumiere, to the moment Daniel had intervened. She realized that his faith in her had not given her life, it had revealed it. She didn't need a miracle to survive anymore. She needed the chance to thrive, and she had been given that chance. Daniel remained a constant presence in their lives, though not as a controlling figure. He treated Aaliyah and her family as equals, as friends, as family. "Dinner at my place tonight," he asked one evening, smiling at Aaliyah and Malik as they left the hospital. "Of course," Aaliyah replied, her heart light. "We'll bring Mom." Over the years, Daniel had become more than a savior. He had become a mentor, a friend, and someone who constantly reminded them of the importance of kindness and integrity. He had given them the world, but he had also given them faith in humanity. During one visit, Rose looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You didn't just save our lives," she said softly. "You restored our hope." Daniel shook his head gently. "No, that was always yours. I just helped the world finally notice it." Aaliyah smiled, feeling the weight of years of struggle lift from her chest. "I won't forget this," she said, "ever." "You never should," Daniel replied. "But now it's time to write your own story, time to make the world better for others like someone once did for you." True to his words, Aaliyah began dedicating time to her community. She volunteered at shelters, tutored children from low-income families, and mentored young women who, like her, were striving for something greater despite their circumstances. She often shared her story, not the humiliating parts, but the parts that mattered: courage, kindness, perseverance, and the ripple effect of compassion. "I was just doing my best," she told one group of young women at a community center. "But someone saw it, and that changed my life. One act of kindness, one moment of understanding can change everything. You never know who might be watching and who might be inspired by you." Her words resonated, sparking hope in hearts that had long been weighed down by hardship. One afternoon, as Aaliyah watched Malik ride his bike down their quiet street, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had money for her family, she had a career she loved, she had hopes she had never dared to dream. And she had a mentor and friend who reminded her that goodness matters always. She turned to her mother, who was tending to the small garden in their backyard. "Mama, do you ever think about that day, the day the billionaire came in?" Rose smiled faintly. "Every day," she said, "because it reminded us that miracles exist not just in fairy tales but in real life, and sometimes the miracle is human kindness." Aaliyah nodded. "I want to be that miracle for someone else someday." "You already are," Rose said. "Every day." As the sun set over their neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Aaliyah reflected on the journey from fear and humiliation to hope and empowerment. She had learned that humanity transcends wealth, race, and status. That one act of kindness can change the course of a life. That courage and perseverance, even in the face of cruelty, are never wasted. Her life had been changed forever, not because she sought wealth or fame, but because she never lost her heart, never stopped caring, and never gave up. And in that she discovered the truest truth of all: a single act of kindness has the power to transform despair into hope, strangers into family, and ordinary people into heroes. Aaliyah's clinic was buzzing softly with the morning's appointments. Children laughed in the waiting room. Elderly patients smiled warmly. Nurses and staff moved with efficiency and care. Aaliyah walked through the room, stopping to greet each patient personally. She paused for a moment in front of a young girl who reminded her of herself at that age, timid, hopeful, brave despite fear. "Hi," Aaliyah said softly. "I'm Aaliyah. You're going to be okay. You're going to do amazing things in your life, just like you've always dreamed." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really? Really?" Aaliyah said, smiling. And in that smile, the legacy of Daniel's kindness, her mother's love, and her own courage radiated brightly. Outside, the sun rose higher in the sky, golden and unwavering, a symbol of the new life Aaliyah had created, one that would continue to grow, inspire, and transform the world around her. The story was no longer about suffering. It was about triumph, hope, and the unbreakable power of the human heart.